Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Walking softly. Ha! It's so good to see your faces. So I just want to begin with asking you, just in your own head, when I say the word work, what are some beliefs that you hold about work?
Hard to do.
What'd you say?
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do. So everyone has their beliefs, and we want to continue to look at our beliefs and also where these beliefs came from. So sometimes, well, there's no way we can get away from the beliefs about work that we were born with. The whole purpose of raising children is children are sponges, and it's not necessarily even what their guardians or caregivers are giving you about what work is. It's what you see around you in your home life when you're growing up. We start creating beliefs just around that, what we see mirrored back to us through the adults in our life, through the educational system, through the cultural belief. We start adopting beliefs about work. And so that's why sometimes we can start shifting our beliefs about work, but it can sometimes be hard because we've had this early training that's gone deep into our subconscious. So that's one of the most powerful things we can do, is to say, what are my beliefs about work now? Were they? Have I changed some of them? What are my new beliefs about work? And I'm going to just begin with an invitation for this week and for this month, is to get into conversations with other people about your beliefs and their beliefs around work, what they were, if they changed. The one thing I know, even with the people in the room, wherever you are, we all have a million stories. This is a topic that has a ton of data. We've done a lot of work in our life. It's very hard to be in this world without having some relationship with work. So every one of us has a lot of stories, a lot of experiences, a lot of thinking around work and our work and what we're doing and why we're doing it, etc. So it's probably what I found. I was surprised how rich this topic was in looking around and having a few conversations, looking on videos about work. It was so rich. There's so much. So I just invite you to be engaged in this topic, because this takes up so much of our life, doesn't it? Work is so much a part of our life every day. It's really valuable to look at who we are, what our relationship with work is. Are there beliefs that we want to change, or are we happy with the beliefs that we have? And how do we see about work in our future? I mean, definitely as we get older and older and older, different views around work. It's so interesting. And is it our beliefs, or are we just adopting the beliefs around the world? So please engage in this topic. You're going to find it amazing. And what's interesting is it might be weird, like to be hanging out with your family members or friends and or colleagues at work and just start asking them about their beliefs about work. But I'm amazed people immediately want to talk about it, because it's so much part of our life. People will engage. The weirdness of the question will go away immediately because the interest in the content is so valuable. For me, work was a big topic in our family growing up. My dad really loved work, and he very intentionally wanted to instill in his children the joy of work for work's sake. So we talked about work quite a bit, and we had work. So we moved when I was about 7 years old, and our house had 2 acres of land, and it was an upper middle class neighborhood. So all the other houses, except for one, they did some yard work, but everyone else had professional lawn care. My dad did not want us to have professional lawn care. He wanted us to work. He wanted us to learn the value of working. He worked all night, we're gonna work. So that was when we looked forward to the weekend, it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait till Saturday, it's a play day. It was like, oh, we gotta work in the yard. So his experiment almost completely failed because we hated it. And it was just a lot of just a lot of work when you're a kid and your friends are out playing and you want to be with them. Just one note, we're all different. So the beauty of growing up with 3 siblings, there's 4 of us. Of the 4, there was one who actually loved work for the sake of working. Like, he just went out and did yard work, and he liked it so much that he could get all the neighborhood kids to help him because he would convince them how fun it was. And they would fall for it for like one Saturday and then they were done. But he was always doing work. It was, in fact, my dad, and then another house, we had a pool, and my dad was taking a picture of my brother and I diving into the pool. He wanted to capture us in air, and he does it. He captures it, and we're looking at the picture, and in the background is my other brother clipping the bushes in the background, doing yard work. So there are people who just love work automatically for the sake of working. They have a lot of energy and they like working. But for other of us, we need a little bit of motivation. And it reminds me of, so I was listening to this experiment, and it's this experiment with meaning versus Sisyphus. They had these two topics, two categories. And they asked people to build these robots from Legos, and they paid them $3. And then they put it under the table and asked them to build another one. Now it's for $2.70. So the money was slowly being depleted, and there was a point where they just said, okay, enough, I'm done building robots. They were told that when they were done, eventually these robots were going to be put away and used again for the next group. But when they saw it, it was under the table. The next group, same thing. Everything was the same, except for when they gave their finished robot to the experimenter, the experimenter would start in front of their face pulling apart their robot. And that's where the Sisyphus idea is. He was the guy in Greek mythology where he had to roll up that big boulder up the hill, remember? And then it would they'd get pushed back down, and he had to do it. And that's all he did was take the boulder up. We talk about the rat race. You just feel like you're doing things and it's really going nowhere. It's very cyclical, meaningless. And those people who saw their work being undone in front of them lost interest really fast and weren't interested. It lost its meaning and purpose. So we learn that meaning is really important in how we show up for work. Do we feel it's a waste of time? Or we feel like the work that we're doing has some sort of meaning, and it doesn't have to have a big meaning. They knew that they were building these robots for some experiment project, and they were being put under the table, so they thought, well, it has some value for a while, so that very small value made a difference. Another way my dad really wanted us to learn work started very young. My parents had different philosophies about what was important for children. So they made a deal, as they very rationally worked out everything. So my mom got her way for the two older kids, and my dad got his way for my brother and myself, the two younger kids. So my two older brothers went to a preschool and kindergarten that was all about play, building blocks, just having a good old time, and they loved it. My brother and I went to a Montessori school. It was a Montessori school that happened also to be in a Jewish temple. My dad had a very high value for the Jewish culture. He thought they had a very wonderful relationship with work, again, trying to have it rub off on us. So what I remember so I went for 2 years of nursery school and kindergarten, and what I remember, the part I loved was the religious part. I loved the Shabbat every Friday, learning Hebrew, celebrating the holidays. What I didn't like was the Montessori part. The Montessori part, Maria Montessori watched these young children who didn't have parents, and that she found that they were being able to take care of themselves, and they found a lot of joy in it. So she has this thing that, well, let's shift this idea that work is bad, that it can be fun and joyous. So the Montessori method is about, they call it works. Let's go do our works. And they don't have stuffed animals, for instance. Like I remember when I first went to public school, they had a little reading corner with stuffed animals. I was like, yes, heaven. You're not allowed to dress up. It's works. You learn, so we did maps, and we did these cubes, which I later learned was a way of learning math in a tangible way. But everything had a purpose, and you had to get smarter. And I didn't find it very particularly joyful or fun. Years later, I meet my wonderful husband, Jack, and we're in Virginia, and at that time he is teaching at 3 different Montessori schools. I'm going to those, going and visiting for their little projects and stuff, and it's the same ideal. You do works, you don't allow, they don't really get into whole imagination, dressing up, stuffed animals. I'm like, nope, not for me. And so I have a very I'm just trying to build a picture, a really negative connotation about this idea of Montessori. And so we started visioning. I got a group of people from our center, our spiritual center in Virginia, and every week we visioned for months because we wanted, Julian was born, and we wanted to vision a new possibility for school. And with the idea that maybe we would create the school. We didn't know, we just kept visioning. And as visioning will do, it takes you in directions you don't plan. So we ended up moving out here to the West Coast. Jack gets I get a job at Oakland, so he's looking around at Montessori's. He ends up at Valley Montessori School. The day we arrive in June, right when they had the 8th grade graduation at Valley Montessori School, Julian's in a stroller. I take him into the graduation. And I am at the graduation, I just start bawling. I'm like, oh my gosh. This is everything we saw in the vision. This place is beautiful. I love it. I want my son to go here until 8th grade. What was different? And this message has been coming for like the last 2 or 3 weeks. The content was the same. The difference was the environment. When I walked in there, that was an environment of nothing but love for those children. They saw these little children come in at 2 years old, and all of the teachers working together. They knew the kids. They could tell stories from when they were 2 until when they were 8th grade. So many of the teachers were parents. It was such a feeling of belonging and community. I asked Julian what his experience was in the preschool. The same years I went, he loved it. He said, oh, it was so warm. I said, did you feel like it was like work? He goes, no, it wasn't work. He loved because it was the environment. And that's what they're really discovering, is how important environment is in your work life. Is that environment, so that, and it has to go along with meaning. So does the environment and the meaning work together? So they had, Maria Montessori had a meaning with her content, but the warmth and the love was missing. If you have the warmth and the love, but you don't have good content, and this is as we get older, that doesn't have the content and isn't meaningful, then that doesn't work either. So as you're looking around your beliefs around work and how you feel about work and how you feel about whether you're going to work in a job, work from home, maybe you're retired, you have projects that you're doing, what is the environment? Does it support you? And everyone's environment is different. What you want from your environment is different. Whether you want lots of people around, whether you want to work by yourself, is it an environment that supports the meaning of your work? Because the other thing that they found was when people had meaning and the environment supported that meaning, they actually preferred working. They preferred harder work. So they did these experiments, and the harder the job was, and they were given some meaning. This job wasn't sort of a meaningful job. It was very simple on one hand, but they had to make origami things hard because they didn't really give them any instructions on how to do it. And the more they worked, the harder they worked, the greater the fulfillment they had, the more they felt that what they did was really important. And the funny thing is, even if it was a really bad, then they would get observers who didn't make it, and they often didn't like the end product, but the person who made it just assumed everybody else really liked it too. I thought of little kids, look at my project. Because we get so much joy out of working hard at something. We feel like we're contributing, we're participating. If it matters to us, if it's meaningful, and the environment is supporting us in that, we have a loving and supportive environment for that. So again, as we're looking at your beliefs, I have to just tell one really, I thought it was an amusing story. In 1940s, they came out with a cake mix. This is the first prefab cake mix. And it was fully orbed. I mean, the whole potter, everything was together. All you had to do was pour a little bit of water in it, put it in a bake pan, and stick it in the oven, and you'd get a cake. People weren't buying it. People didn't like it. And they were doing taste tests. People liked what they didn't know. They were just like blind. They liked the taste, so it wasn't the taste. What was it? They decided to take out the eggs and the milk and make people put in their own eggs and measure their own milk. And now they felt they were participating in making the cake. It was their cake because they put the eggs and the milk in, and now they loved it, and it went crazy, and people loved it. It was that very participation of putting in the eggs and the milk that made it more appealing than just having the powder and the mix already fully formed and given to you. And then, of course, if we can go all the way, if you make a cake from scratch, or when we make things from scratch, the fulfillment of doing, I mean, it's so much easier to go to a restaurant and buy something, but when you make something from the beginning and give your heart and soul to it, it tastes better, doesn't it? It's richer, it's fuller, and you want to share it with your friends. So it's not, and that, to me, that goes back to where I think my dad felt, because he felt always meaning in what he did. So he felt great joy in work. And it turns out we all feel great joy in working when we feel like it has meaning. It's not to our advantage when we say, oh, this is really important to you, but you don't have to work very hard at it. We won't ask very much of you. That's not actually appealing to people. No, if this matters to me, I want to be asked. I want it to ask a lot of me. I want it to push me and to grow. Because work is a part of, work makes us grow when it's good, but if it's obligatory, if we have to do it, then it like we see it with school a lot of times. You have to do your homework, and it becomes this very negative thing versus I want to do it. It's important, it's purposeful to me, and so that's what they're constantly working on in the school system, is to make the child engaged. That's the Montessori way, is to follow the child, let the child be engaged, lead the way for the engagement, and have the environment to support that. And we want to continue that into our world. Are we engaged? How much say do we have? The wonderful part of this is that we know that we now can move from victimhood to empowerment, that we have choices every step of the way. And I remember Reverend Michael saying, this was years ago, that the workforce now, everything that we teach is in the workforce. Affirmations, face your fears, create the world that you want. They have 1 million anagrams for fear. What was it? False evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real is one of them. So you see this everywhere. You have the motivational speakers, Tony Robbins. I love Jesse Itzler because he's doing a lot more than speaking a lot. But there's just all these people saying, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And that's great. We can create in a work environment, get clear what we want. The guy who started Denica's, he had a place in Dublin, and we have a Denica's that's doing very well here in Livermore. He went to a Tony Robbins conference, and Tony Robbins, do another one, reach, push, and he pushed him, and he's so happy. Now he's got 2 Denica's, and it's flourishing. So we have these motivators, people who tell us we can do what we want, we can create, there's a possibility of creating. But there's something that New Thought brings that I find, for me, is missing in some of the typical motivational speaker stuff. We have God. And that, to me, is a huge shift. Because now it's not we're creating it, but we're aligning. That's why we call it co-creation. We are participating with the all-power of the universe in opening to this new possibilities, these new ways of being. The word good, so we have a lot of adjectives like love, good, beauty, and in the human realm they have an opposite, but when we talk about divine good, there is no opposite. There's only good, where there is no opposing force. I remember the first time I learned that, man, things just shifted, because I just kept walking through the day, oh, they only want good for me. There's nothing fighting me. There's nothing to fight against. There's only good. When we understand spiritual principles, we realize, oh, I'm not just making this up. This is actually real. There's a spiritual power moving through that can help us open up to greater good than we ever before imagined, as we heard in Ernest Holmes today, which is constantly opening up to good. Emma Curtis Hawkins, who they call the teacher of Teacher in New Thought, she said, if you just added an O to every time you said God and just called it good, that it is just always good. So I open my heart. It's unconditional good. Unconditional good. It is always there. And we just start opening up more and more to this infinite good. It allows something to move through into our life of goodness that we didn't imagine. And the great thing about knowing in our teaching is not just that a good that is out there, but it's right here in the midst of us. I remember I was working in the psychiatric hospital, and I got there from surrendering and listening to my good, to my God, to where I was supposed to be, where I was supposed to shine my gift. And so I was working there, and I loved it. And I used to say it, I stopped saying it because after a while it sounded a little pretentious, but I used to say, God's my employer, God's my boss, that's why I'm here. I was very clear that that's why I was there. And I had been working there for months, and I remember a group of the staff were complaining about what was happening in administration, and it was the first time, and I thought it was the first time I realized, oh yeah, there's administrators who run this hospital. I was so not in tune with that because I was always talking to the divine in my work every day. Where I was all the good of the universe. It wasn't with the policies and of what the administrations were doing, what the bosses were doing. I never thought about them. If that was my job, then I'd think about it, but it wasn't my job. My job was to work with the patients. So where I am, where you are, the infinite goodness of God, the all-powerful goodness of God it's already there. It's already there. You're just aligning with it, and it's not dependent on anyone else. Even as I was going through the CSL classes, which we are beginning here, I remember coming to my second class, and I was at that time very shy, so I didn't talk to anybody, but I remember coming up to the class, and all the students were outside the building. And I'm like, what's going on? And they say, well, we don't like this teacher. He's a terrible teacher. And it was like a mutiny to the teacher. They wanted to throw out the teacher. And I'm like, it didn't even dawn on me because I was so lost in my own experience I was having a great time. But my great time wasn't dependent on anything else. Then the next class, they were evaluating at the end of the class of whether the curriculum was good enough, and they were tearing it apart. Again, that's not where my mind was. My mind was on the divine presence right where we are. This is the most empowering principle we can have. We can have the empowerment. We can do anything. I grew up in a very sort of can-do world. We can do it. But when we align with the infinite nature of pure spirit, something amazing happens. We become even less of a victim. We become even more empowered, more full of life, more full of love, because we know it's real. And I have tested it so many times, and it blows me away. And I'm sure as you tell each other your stories, you have stories to tell. When you know you felt the divine presence at your workplace, in the middle of what you're doing, and you can complain, or it's not to say there's not problems. I should say that too. The other things that I was hearing as I was going through these videos is workplace stress is something costs about every year into the billions, almost into the trillions. He's saying depending on what you take in as effects. So there's a ton of workplace stress. I'm not trying to be cavalier about this or that it's all very simple. It is very stressful, which is exactly why we need to be talking about it, which is exactly why we need, when we know that the infinite power is within us, we need to start really looking at our beliefs, conscious and subconscious, talking with our friends, because our environment, our supportive environment, are our friends supporting our new beliefs? If we want to shift our beliefs, are they right there holding that? Or they're going to say, oh, you're stuck. That sucks, man, that's terrible. Of course you have kids, you have bills to pay, you have to be miserable to pay this. We want people who are going to join us in shifting into this infinite realm of good. Get into the conversations about work. What do you believe about work? What is possible? It is hard because, like I said, there's billions of dollars spent every year due to workplace stress. We feel that in our energetic field as well. So that's why it's so important that we step into what we know and what we believe, and have conversations is one of the most powerful ways. But there's another powerful way as well, in addition to having these conversations about beliefs and exploring our false beliefs, our limiting beliefs into our infinite beliefs, and that's wonder. Our theme this month is wonder. And it's so funny, because when I talked to Julian, I just wanted to ask him all these years later how he felt about work. How you grew up in this Montessori system, and they really had a different view. They wanted to look at work at positive. Do you see it work positive? He says, well, I see it kind of the way other people see it now, like you have to work hard and stuff. He said, but when I was a kid, I loved it. And I said, well, what's the difference? out of the blue, he said this. What for me, it just surprised me. He said, well, when I was a kid, he stopped. He was thinking about it. He was contemplating what work felt like when he was in primary. And he said, I felt wonder. He said, every time I did work, it was just like everything was like this wonder. And he said, sometimes I lose that wonder now that I'm older now. I have to do these homework assignments. I have to do all this stuff, but I don't feel wonder. And I was really being with that. And the person who wrote the outline today, she had one phrase that really got to me. Take wonder to work. That's going to be your assignment. Take wonder to work. Wonder is where we get to create space. So there's, I love this analogy, and I think I'm just going to just use it every week now because I love it so much. Because I think everything that we experience has these two forms. So I've explained it before. I'm going to explain it again. Excuse the repetition. When I was in a world religions class, people asked the professor what had the biggest impact on American culture, what Eastern teaching had the biggest influence, and we were thinking Hinduism, Buddhism, and he said Taoism. And he said, masculine energy comes in through the front door of the house and announces itself. It teaches its theology. It will teach you its practices. It'll say, here, this is what it is. And then you can get into arguments or discussions or dialogues. Do you believe it? Don't you believe it? That's the whole discussion about beliefs. What are your beliefs? What are my false beliefs? That's all energy coming in through the front door. By the way, when I was looking up YouTube, and this might just be on mine, I don't know, but when I looked up YouTubes on work, every lecturer was male. I thought, wow, that's the only time that's ever happened where it's all male. I think we still have a very masculine view about work, which is front door. What are my beliefs? How do I change it? How do I create a new world? Blah, blah, blah. How do I co-create with God a new world? Wonder is through the back door. Wonder is the feminine energy, and he said the feminine energy comes in through the back door, fills the entire house. There's no resistance because you're not seeing it. You're focused on the front door, and it comes in and it fills the whole house and changes everything. That's the power of coming in through the back door. So he was saying things like martial arts. You have people who have very strong theologies who would be totally against a lot of the theology that Christians who might be against Buddhist philosophy. But they're in martial arts class learning the power of energy, but not through the front door, not here's our theology, but through the back door. Everything, Reiki, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, learning stuff through the back door first. When people came to learn Buddhism from Shunryu Suzuki, they wanted him to give lectures, and he refused. He said, no, you're going to meditate first. You're going to allow that energy to come in through the back door and start feeling that energy first before I come in through the front door. If I just come in through the front door, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. My favorite example of this, I love having three brothers because I got lots of examples, is my brother Rob. He's the youngest of the three boys, and he worked in IT, and he's had a sort of an up and down career, lived in Japan for 18 years, speaks fluent Japanese, and sort of has been seeking to find his own thing, his own way. Like he was doing well, but then he started his own business because he wanted his own voice, struggling to find it. But, got it, then was working, I'm from Cleveland, brought his family over to Cleveland, working at the biggest IT firm in Ohio, and really liking it. But liking it, I wouldn't say really liking it. And then when his had the empty nest, his IT was copying Google, so they had people who did yoga who came in to teach yoga in their business. And he said, the only thing that motivated me, I was out of shape, and I saw all these guys who could do these really muscular things in yoga and do these crazy things. He goes, I wanted to do that. And he said, so that was my total goal. And he showed up to all these yoga classes, and never has been flexible in his life. And he's doing yoga. Confirmed atheist, like passionate atheist. And then it's just one class. He's having a hard time with the pose. The teacher comes over to him, and she just starts breathing with him. And through that breath, suddenly, he just opens up to seeing a whole nother world of possibility. That one moment of allowing wonder to come in, something that he never, ever imagined, had no interest in, was almost critical of, and then in that moment, started doing yoga more, became a yoga teacher. His work life totally changed. He didn't make all, it's like suddenly he just sort of fell into the perfect job. He goes, oh, I don't really do anything. I don't really work at my job. I just talk to people. He's a conflict resolution. He goes, I just ask them a lot of questions. I empower them to take action. It's great. I just get paid to talk all day. I don't even feel like I'm working. I don't believe in work. I just have a great time. All of this happened from that one moment of the breath. This wonder, and you listen to his life, and he's got like a just things just keep flowing, because now he's allowing he goes to Curtin, his whole life has changed. It came in through the back door. If that yoga teacher had said, well, here's what our philosophy is, here's what our theology is, he would have shut down so fast and never gone back. It came in through the back door. Wonder comes in through the back door and fills our whole house. Or as we teach, it's already there. The infinite good of God is already in the house. And as we open up in wonder, we start seeing what we could never see before. And nobody can teach it to us. This is not a front door thing. This is not something that someone comes in and says, well, here it is. And if you look here, if you do this, or if you do these 3 steps, you always know you're in the masculine energy if you have well, here are the 5 steps. There are no steps to this. It's just a state of being. As Julian said it when he was learning as a kid, it was just a state of wonder. Everything was like, oh. So my invitation, I have 2 invitations. One, get into the front door discussions with people. What are my beliefs? What were my parents' beliefs? Or my caregivers' beliefs? What was the community that I grew up in, the school system? I mean, obviously the school system's going to have, because how we do school often reflects to how we feel about work, because that's our training of what work's going to look like. So I remember learning years ago about if you're trained that you just got to show up and get your work done and you have all these obligations, and you're going to carry that into your work life. Oh yeah, I got to do work, I have my obligations and my tasks, and it's a habit pattern that we start kids on a very young age. That's why I didn't want to do Julian on that habit. That's why we were visioning. It's like, I don't want him just on this, like, I got to get my task done to ring the bell. I finished that goal, I finished that goal, I finished that goal. That is not a life of meaningness. That's a Sisyphus, whatever the word is. You know what I'm talking about. It's the cyclical rat race. That's what we don't want. We want to be alive. We want to be awake in our work life. What are my beliefs? What are the beliefs that I've carried from my subconscious mind that might still be hanging out there? So I might not think I believe it, but do I see evidence of it? Of these limiting false beliefs? Not to be judgmental or blameful, but maybe I can shift them. And then talk to your friends and hear what their beliefs are. It's an incredibly engaging conversation. And you know, when you get into conversations with your friends, you start seeing it everywhere. It starts showing up. Healing starts to become more possible because now there's more space. So that's the first invitation. Get into conversations with yourself, with your friends, with your family and your colleagues, of course, about your beliefs around work. And the second invitation is take wonder to work week. When you're going to work, consciously take this consciousness of wonder. What's like a wonderful thing, wonder-filled thing that happened today? What new thing that I didn't even expect showed up today? What came in through the back door to surprise me and delight me? And see what shows up. See if new things start to show up for you that may be as simple as a breath. As simple and as quiet and as uneventful as a breath. You know, motivational speakers are all about jumping up and down and getting you all wired up, but this is quiet breath. Just a breath can change the world, can change your world. That's what we're talking about here. Wonder-filled work, good work that is of the divine. That's what we're here to do. That's the meaning we are here to express. That's the joy we are here to fulfill. Let's pray. So as we anchor into this wonderful energy of goodness, the goodness of the divine, and that this goodness doesn't come and go, that is not only sometimes, it is not a reward for something done, it has already been given. The infinite goodness of God, as Emma Curtis Hawkins says, has already been given. It's already filled our home. It's already filled our environment. And so we are here today. When we walk into prayer, we're walking into an environment of goodness. We're walking into an already doneness of the goodness of heaven on earth already in our inner world, in our inner environment, and in our outer environment. We choose to see and feel that which is more real than the chairs upon which we are sitting. We choose to feel and know this goodness that exists and is alive and vital in every area of our life, not just work life, in all life. And how grateful I am that as we come together as a community, we have this collective intention to grow in our understanding of what work is, to maybe shift false beliefs individually and collectively and support each other as we grow into a wonderful and expansive idea of what is possible, the good that is possible for each of us as we open our hearts and our minds to new ways of being, and we open our heart and our mind to this wonderful world of wonder that exists in the midst of work. We let any idea that work is only a front door activity, and we open up to the divine, soft gentleness, gently moving and flowing through our environment every single day, and we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the heart to feel. We feel this energy and this light and this beauty and this harmony moving through even what we might be struggling with in our work life. It is finding a way for us. It's finding a way that we didn't even know was there. We might feel stuck in our work. We might feel overly tense in work. We just open to the wonder and we allow that new breath to carry us into a world that we never before saw, that opens our eyes, that opens our ears, that opens our heart. And today, as we feel into this wonderful power of love and of goodness in the work life, I invite our community, as we are aware that we're in a heat wave here in California. And I was just reading this morning about some fires in Northern California. We know that in this place of drought and heat, we have this possibility, not essential, but there is a possibility of fires. And so we want to pray beforehand. We want to pray beforehand that this presence of goodness goes before us. This goodness is already coming through the back door, and we hold this goodness for the land, for this beautiful land, that in this drought there is a light, there is a love, there is a health that is beyond the world of appearances, that is beyond the world of drought. And we see and know the wholeness of our beautiful land and all of its inhabitants. We see and hold firefighters who are getting ready and holding that possibility of what might happen with this heat wave and the drought. And even before anything happens, we hold them in the light and the wholeness and the support that their work environment is an environment that is supportive of them giving their gifts and their families. We hold all of us who are walking through a heat wave. It's just a momentary experience, a temporary experience, and yet it can displace people. We know that. We hold everybody in this infinite care, in this infinite goodness of God. There's no place where it stops and something else begins, and it is up to us as spiritual beings to see, to know, and to feel this for all beings, for all sentient life forms. And so we collectively hold this together. We say yes to this. We say yes to this calling to know and to see and to feel the good everywhere present all of the time. And so in humility and in joy and in peace and surrender and in absolute infinite gratitude, and so much gratitude, we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And we collectively say now. And so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say. walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say.